Thank you. Thanks. Well, I realized when I was driving up here yesterday, that yesterday was my 30-year anniversary with the DNR. So today, thanks, I appreciate it. Today is actually the first day that I'm in work because I want to be, not because I have to be. And I think I'm probably in a lot of good company because I picked up talking to people in the room, and I don't know a lot of you because I don't get up this way very often, but that I'm in good company with a lot of land managers who aren't afraid to get dirty doing their job and really care about the landscapes that they're managing. And I have no doubt that most of you could be up here giving a talk about the piece of property that gets you out of bed in the morning, that has you excited to go to work. And so I want to express my gratitude to get a chance to talk to you about the piece of property that I love and that's gotten me out of bed for 30 years. So it's Sprewell Bluff Wildlife Management Area, and if you've never heard of it, you're in good company. I'd say most Georgians have never heard of it. And in a lot of ways, that's been to our advantage because I've gotten away with a lot of very intensive land management that probably would not have passed muster if we had to go through NEPA or had a friends group or a trail club or the Sierra Club or any of these other groups that don't like management. But there's definitely a lot of people that love the place, most of them locals that hunt and fish and hike and kayak and camp this area. So let me show you where it is. This is Georgia. An elevation map, and we've got 5 physiographic provinces. We've got the coastal plain down here. We've got the southern Appalachians up here. We've got a little bit of Ridge and Valley, even smaller bit of Cumberland Plateau, and then we've got the Georgia Piedmont. And it's hard for me to see this, but I think Metro Atlanta is right about there. And the Georgia Piedmont is characterized by heavy clay soils, a lot of old cotton, ag land, loblolly pine, water oak, sweet gum, pretty messed up landscape. But it's trying to recover. And if you look a little bit closer in the Georgia Piedmont, you'll see this weird ridge. And there's a couple of fault lines, the Taulagi and the Box Ankle faults. They created metamorphic rock out of sedimentary rock, which is a lot harder and erodes more slowly. And thus was born Pine Mountain. And Pine Mountain is where Sprewell Bluff is. And Sprewell is over here where the Flint River, which you can kind of see in the county lines, cuts through Pine Mountain. Sprewell's about 8,000 acres now. It was about 3,000 when I started. And it's just low mountains, got this beautiful shoaly river running through the middle of it full of shoal bass and really fun place to go kayaking and swimming in the summer. And it has a lot of rare communities in it. This is one of them that I think is a good example of what makes Sprewell special. So this is a longleaf pine heath bluff. And it's a great example of the coastal plain meeting the Appalachians. So we've got longleaf pine, which is much more of a coastal plain affinity, growing on top of that Hollis quartzite rock that you can see there. And then, all around it are rhododendron blooming, which is really an Appalachian species. And this is true of really across taxa. So whether you're talking about herpetofauna or birds or the floristics, it's a place where coastal plain meets Appalachian. So it's a biodiversity hotspot. There's a lot of species that are co-occurring here that are probably not co-occurring anywhere else in the world, and it has some interesting, some rare species of its own. This is probably more typical of Sprewell Bluff. It's montane longleaf, and I know longleaf gets probably more love than it's due, perhaps compared to some of the other systems in the eastern U.S. Montane longleaf kind of gets ignored. It's really not pure longleaf. It's co-dominant with a variety of hardwoods. It's a much more complex canopy structure. It's got the hardwoods include black oak, post oak, northern red oak, scarlet oak, southern red oak, sand post oak, black gum, dogwood. That's a pretty good list, I'd say. There's a lot of other things, Alabama cherry. Anyway, it's a neat, diverse landscape, but the coolest thing about it is the ground cover. And you can see in this photo the rich, dominant, little blue stem dominant understory that makes for some great wildlife habitat and great fires. One of the other neat things about Sprewell is that, and this is why it's surprising to me that it's not better known, is it is just covered with old growth. It did get logged, but it didn't ever get clear cut. It doesn't have the ag history the rest of the Piedmont does. And we've got several thousand acres with these scattered old flat top longleaf that are, they get flat topped when they're about 120, 150 years old. And these trees are well past their 300th birthday. They may be, we've documented several that are over 400. And it's not just the longleaf that's old growth. There's also old post oaks that are probably equally old. chestnut oaks, things like that. It's a spectacular landscape. And we've got thousands of acres of this. We've also got a lot of oak woodlands. Some of those are on the northern aspects where the pine is less dominant. Some of them are places where probably historically the longleaf was logged out and the pine didn't recover. We've added, as I alluded to, we've added a lot of acres, and so we picked up a lot of clear cuts, and this is another cover type that's all over Sprewell. This is planted longleaf that's about 2-3 years old. It's getting its first taste of fire. We have a lot of pine plantations. This is off-site loblolly. But the neat thing about a lot of these sites is they still retain the really amazing ground cover that goes with montane longleaf. So it's not uncommon in a spot like this to get 40 or 50 species of plant per square meter, which is spectacular. It definitely is right up there with tall grass prairie and a lot of the other great ecosystems. And those are easily restorable. Just got to get the loblolly out of there and get some pine back and some post oaks. And then, unfortunately, we also have a lot of this. And this is what passes as sustainable forestry in Georgia, unfortunately. Real threat to our biodiversity and throughout the Southeast. This was old growth longleaf pine in 1998, clear cut in 99 by Temple Inland, now International Paper. It was broadcast sprayed with glyphosate and the ground cover was wiped out. I wouldn't call that sustainable, and I'm not sure I'd call that forestry, but that's what we see a lot of in Georgia, real problem. All right. I'm going to take you on a little tour of a spot that I take just about everybody that I show Sprewell Bluff. It's a neat little place where two roads tee into each other. And so there's kind of 3 different parcels of the same stand you can look at. This piece you're looking at now, it's about 2 acres that's right on the property line, and I've never done anything to it. We've never burned it. We've never thinned it. This is what most of Sprewell Bluff looked like when I first laid eyes on it 30 years ago. Believe it or not, there are old growth longleaf scattered around back in there and old post oaks, but you can't see them for all the hardwood encroachment. And the ground cover is sparse and not a lot to talk about. All right, now you're going to turn 180 degrees and look at the other side of the road. And this is the same stand, and it's been burned for 28 years on a 2-year fire rotation. And you can see it just got burned recently, so it's a little hard to evaluate the ground cover, but I'll tell you there's nothing there. 28 years of fire got us nothing. And I think it's really important to tell that story. I think most of you in this room get that fire is not a restoration tool. Fire is a maintenance tool. And so it's really interesting to see that, I think. I'm going to turn you another 90 degrees, and you're going to look across the last road at the last parcel, same stand. This is what we're aiming for. This is a really pretty open longleaf pine woodland. How did we get there, and how did we decide to take it to this location, to this type of a destination? I've got 5 tools I want to talk about. The first one is history. If you look at Sprewell, a lot of clear cuts, a lot of pine plantations, a lot of projects to do. What do you do with these places? You know, we know that longleaf was there, shortleaf was there, probably some loblolly. We know there's some hardwoods. What should we put where? How much of it? Well, for better or for worse, we went through the land lottery in the early 1800s that resulted in the theft of Native American lands, the genocide of Native American people, the Trail of Tears at the hands of our government, at the hands of our governor. And but the silver lining, if you can say there's a silver lining in anything so atrocious, was a systematic survey of all the tree species for Georgia over 4/5 of our landmass. And these lots were given away to white men. They're about 202 acres, and they're delineated by trees that were blazed along the property line. And you can see tree species that are abbreviated. So RO's, red oak, PO's post oak, HIC is one of the hickories, pine, chestnut. A lot of them can be identified as species. A second bit of history that we've got on Sprewell are all these abandoned red-cockaded woodpecker trees, different clusters. And if you know anything about red-cockaded woodpeckers, you know that their habitat is probably best described by mature southern yellow pines, frequently burned, scattered hardwoods or no hardwoods. And you look at the context of this picture and you can see why we lost red-cockaded woodpeckers in the 1970s. Fire suppression and hardwood encroachment wiped them out. And so we don't have any, or we didn't have any when I started this. The third bit of history that I got to work with was a dendrochronology study that I put in 2007. There's been a lot better studies since then, but at the time there wasn't. And so we went out and collected a bunch of stumps, about 70, and we documented the fire history for the site. And what we found was the 20th century, very few fires. The 19th century was after about 1840, after the Trail of Tears, it was about annual winter burning. And prior to that, the Muskogee Nation was burning about every 2.5 years, about half of it in the summertime. And later studies have backed up this work that we did. And so this gave us some marching orders in terms of our second tool, fire. And we've heard a ton about fire. I don't want to, I could talk about it for an hour, and I'm sure a lot of us in the room could. So I'm just going to share some of my favorite photos. This place is really exciting to burn. It's like getting out of your Ford Taurus and getting in a Lamborghini in terms of fire. This place has got steep ground, grassy fuels. It's got a lot of wind moving up and down the canyons, and it creates some just spectacular fires. Our average burn unit is about 300 or 400 acres in size. A lot of our units are over 1,000. All 8,000 acres are on a 2-year rotation. And I've definitely seen some of the most sublime beauty of my career, and I bet a lot of you can say the same thing, burning in landscapes like this. That's the full moon rising over a big valley on fire. There's coyotes howling off in the distance. It was really cool. All right, I'd love to hear your stories about fire, maybe at the social tonight. I'm not going to belabor it. Our third tool, we needed to reduce our hardwoods and get some of those offsite loblolly pine gone. And so I'm coming back to those land lottery maps. How do we use these? Well, I took a very simplistic approach. I would, around a project area, just summarize the tree species that are documented. And that gives us sort of the ratios of stocking that we want. And from that, I created a marking guide. And so when we go out and mark timber, we've got category 1, which are species we always keep. We've got category 3, which are offsite species that we're always cutting, get rid of all of them. And then we fill in our basal area. We have a target basal area with species that are sort of in the middle. We cut a lot of those, we keep some of them. Where we can, we use commercial timber harvest, and we've done a lot of that. But back to this site, a lot of our land is non-merchantable. It's the timber value is not there. It's too far from a road. It's steep ground. It's rocky ground where they don't want to use a feller buncher. And so we have done literally thousands of acres of hack and squirt. Again, imagine having to go through NEPA and public comment for killing thousands of acres of hardwoods. I've actually looked at whole mountainsides, and I've actually lost sleep about it because I feel kind of bad. I love trees. I mean, I think most of us do. I've lost sleep about killing the tens of thousands of oaks that we've killed, but the result, I think, has been worth it. So I've seen whole mountainsides turn gray, where we got rid of 90% of the hardwoods to restore these oak woodlands. And so there's thousands of dead trees. They eventually rot and fall down. And before you know it, you've got these beautiful oak woodlands that make the process worthwhile. It's a lot like making sausage. Nobody wants to see it made. Everybody enjoys it once it's done. And I got away with that. I'm still kind of surprised I did. Another tool that we do is planting a lot of shortleaf and longleaf. So I don't really like clear cutting natural stands, and so we did a lot of underplanting, and that was controversial. It's getting to be less controversial. So this is the same stand. This was, on the left is 2004, and on the right is probably 2025 or so. And so we went through there with a commercial timber thin after we'd planted and removed a lot of the hardwoods. We figured out for ourselves, because the data really wasn't out there, about how to manage the overstory to get longleaf and shortleaf pine recruitment. We don't really have to worry about our oak recruitment. We have tons. I've been hearing the stories about oak decline for years, and I know you guys are struggling with it. We don't have that problem. Oaks are a problem for us. They're just, we have too many of them. I like having a lot of them, but we have too many. But anyway, we learned that, residual basal area matters for longleaf pine recruitment, but when you split out the residual basal area, pine basal area really doesn't have nearly as strong effect as hardwood basal area does. And so if you combine these target basal areas with our marking guidelines, all of a sudden you know what to do with that stand you're trying to restore. And the last tool I wanted to talk about is selective herbicides. So I don't know that you all have quite the problem we do in Georgia and elsewhere in the Southeast with broadcast application of broad spectrum herbicides, but it happens a lot in Georgia, and it's destroying a lot of our really pretty places. And so on the left, that's a broadcast spray of glyphosate. knocks out pretty much everything. On the right, that's a stand that was broadcast sprayed with imazapyr about 30 years ago. And if you look closely, the understory is about 80% Sericea lespedeza. So people will tell you that the ground cover will come back. I'm here to tell you it won't. And so you can't take it for granted. You've got to take care of your ground cover. You've got to care for it. So what we do, and I use a lot of herbicide, we use selective directional spraying, selective spraying with backpack crews. And in those situations, we use broad spectrum herbicides, but we're just spraying the things we're trying to get rid of. We hire contract crews to do that. And then we also broadcast spray, but we use selective herbicides. And we've spent a lot of time working out how to use these in a way that doesn't diminish our ground cover diversity and that also still gets us the longleaf and shortleaf recruitment we want. And so it's hard. I know you can't read this. I've got a QR code coming up in a minute. Anyway, these are 12 different trials, and the green are longleaf recruitment and the brown are ground cover change. And so you can see some herbicide combos actually enhance ground cover, some of them diminish it, and there's several of them that are good options that actually enhance ground cover diversity while also giving you good pine recruitment. And if there's really one thing you take away from my talk, I would love it if you would, if you're using herbicides and you're trying to figure out how to do this, I'd love it if you watch this video or at least part of it. So the Forest Stewardship Guild put on a video that has some of our research and a lot of other really good researchers' work in montane longleaf, but it's broadly applicable to oak and oak pine woodlands really everywhere. And in it, we go over our field trials. So we get down, literally into the weeds, talking about what species are going to be impacted by different herbicide trials or different herbicide treatments, and we get into rates per acre and all that stuff. So I hope you find it useful. So ground cover, it's what drives our wildlife population. It's what drives our fire program. It's really our most important aspect of our restoration. A few things I didn't really touch on. You've gathered a little bit probably that we do a lot of adaptive management. We didn't necessarily know the answers, but if we needed an answer, we worked on it. We tried something, we put in good monitoring, we figured it out, and we've actually got a few publications out of it too, which has been fun. I think another thing that really helped us succeed that I didn't touch on, but it's important to mention, is that we've had a really great work environment. We still do. I've spent 30 years basically in the same job, and I've passed up the opportunity to take promotions. And I've got 2 technicians that are elderly now that won't retire. I guess I'm getting there too. So we've lost almost nobody through this journey. And I think it's really important to recognize this, because the culture, the work culture that we've created is the only way you get a promotion, the only way you get a pay raise is you leave your job and start a different one. And there's no surer way to fail at restoration than to have constant churn in leadership, or even in the technician level where people are doing the work. You've got to keep people in the same place long enough to get a restoration completed. And right now our work culture doesn't reward people who stay, it rewards people who leave. And that's a recipe for failure, I think. I haven't seen a restoration project yet that gets done, that's really done in a year or 2 or 5. It's a multi-decade project to restore just about any ecosystem. I mentioned on there also just, our harvest plans are 5 or 6 pages, our burn plans are 1 page. We don't have a lot of bureaucracy getting in the way of us doing our job, which makes it a nice place to work. I mentioned that we don't have very much public input. I'm still kind of surprised that we didn't get any pushback, but we don't have a lot of recreation groups like hikers or backpackers or the city folks that tend to get upset about trees getting cut. And the hunters love it. And so we've done really well with that. And I'll close with one of my favorite pictures. This was 4 years ago, 2022, time flies. This is us putting the first red cockaded woodpecker back on Sprewell Bluff. And I'm happy to report we've had 4 nests this year and fledged, I think we're up to 9. So yeah, they're making a comeback, and so are a lot of other plants and animals that I care about. And so that's my story of success, and I'm glad to share it with you. Thanks.